Most people think the home buying question is simple. How much can I afford? Banks make it feel even simpler. They give you a number. They pre-approve you. They show you a monthly payment that fits neatly into a spreadsheet. And for most people, that's where the thinking stops. Because once you hear the words, "you're approved," the decision starts to feel official, responsible, almost inevitable. But here's the problem. Affordability is not the same thing as safety, and approval is not the same thing as readiness. A mortgage doesn't just take money from your present, it quietly commits your future. It commits future income you haven't earned yet, future flexibility you don't realize you'll need, future choices that only exist if you still have margin. And the earlier in life you take on a large fixed obligation, the more of that future you're locking in before you even know what your life is going to look like. This is why so many people do everything right and still feel more stressed, more fragile, and less free afterward. Not because buying a home was a mistake, but because they asked the wrong question. This video isn't about telling you to buy or not buy. It's about reframing the decision entirely. Because the real questions aren't, how much will the bank lend me, or what can I get approved for? The real questions are harder. When does buying a home actually make sense financially? And how do you buy one without quietly trapping your future options? That's where we're going to unpack, slowly, clearly, and without pretending this decision is simpler than it really is. Let's start by talking about the situations where buying a home early is statistically dangerous, not emotionally, not philosophically, but structurally. The first one is unstable income. Imagine someone who's 28 years old earning $90,000 a year. On paper, that looks solid, more than enough to qualify for a mortgage in most markets. But here's the detail that matters. 30 to 40% of that income comes from bonuses, commissions, or performance pay, or it comes from an industry that's highly cyclical. From the bank's point of view, this is fine. They look at the current number, they average it out, they approve the loan. But your income doesn't move the way a spreadsheet does. A year later, that same income can be down 20 or 30%. Not because you failed, but because markets shift, demand changes, or incentives dry up. The mortgage, however, does not adjust. And this is the first core risk. Variable income combined with high fixed costs doesn't create discomfort. It creates a fragile system. The second situation is thin margin. Let's put real numbers on it. Say your take-home income is $6,000 a month. Your non-housing living expenses are about $3,200. The bank offers you a mortgage including taxes and insurance that costs $2,400 a month. Do the math. That puts your fixed expenses at $5,600, which leaves $400 of margin. $400. That's not a buffer, that's a hope. One car repair, one medical bill, one missed bonus, and pressure shows up immediately. This isn't about being irresponsible. It's not about being bad with money. It's about having no room to be wrong. The third situation is when your life still needs flexibility. If you might change careers, move cities, start a business, or take a risk that doesn't pay immediately, then buying a home at that stage doesn't increase safety. It reduces optionality. You're anchoring yourself before your trajectory has stabilized. And the key insight here is this. Early in life, flexibility is more valuable than ownership. Buying a house too soon doesn't make you safer. It lowers your margin, narrows your choices, and quietly reduces your probability of long-term success. Not through drama, but through structure. Buying a home is not about age. It's about the stability of the system you're building. Two people can be the same age, earn similar incomes, and still be in completely different positions financially depending on how predictable their lives actually are. The first condition is income stability over time. Not a good year, not a recent raise, but a pattern that's held for at least 3 to 5 years. The number itself doesn't have to be impressive. What matters is how it behaves. An income of $70,000 that's steady, repeatable, and not dependent on bonuses or commissions is often safer than an income of $110,000 that swings with market cycles or incentives. Banks don't care about that distinction. They underwrite the present. You have to underwrite the future. The second condition is housing cost relative to your real income, and this is where most people quietly get into trouble. A useful rule isn't what the bank allows, it's what preserves margin. If your take-home income is about $5,500 a month, a sustainable housing cost lives somewhere around $1,600. That includes the mortgage, property taxes, and insurance. A bank may approve you for a payment of $2,300 or even $2,500, and on paper that works. But sustainability isn't about whether the math closes today. It's about whether your system survives change. This is the core mismatch. Banks optimize for repayment certainty. You need to optimize for margin. Margin is what absorbs shocks. Margin is what keeps decisions rational when something goes wrong. The third condition is life stability. Buying a home makes more sense when your life no longer needs frequent pivots. You're not planning to change industries. You're not likely to relocate. You're not relying on optionality to create upside. At that stage, stability becomes more valuable than flexibility. And here's the reframing that matters. Early in life, you're not supposed to optimize for permanence. You're supposed to optimize for adaptability. Later on, once your trajectory has narrowed, naturally, ownership can support that stability rather than undermine it. That's why the right time to buy a home isn't when you feel pressure to settle down. It's when settling down no longer costs you opportunity. This is where a lot of people get tripped up. Because once buying a home feels reasonable, the next assumption is that buying more must be better. Let's compare two people who look identical on paper. Both earn $100,000 a year. Same age, same career stage, same credit profile. The only difference is the house they choose. Person A buys a $450,000 home. Their monthly housing cost comes out to around $2,700. Person B buys a $300,000 home. Their monthly cost is closer to $1,800. On the surface, the difference doesn't look dramatic. $900 a month. It feels manageable. It feels like a lifestyle upgrade. But zoom out. That $900 is $10,800 a year. Over 10 years, that's $108,000, and that's before you even talk about investing it. Now look at how that difference changes behavior. Person B has options. When markets drop, they can invest. If they lose a job, they can absorb it. If a new opportunity shows up, they can say yes without panic. Person A lives differently. Every decision has to be filtered through obligation. Career risks feel irresponsible. Side projects feel dangerous. Periods of uncertainty feel threatening instead of temporary. Not because person A is bad with money, not because they made a reckless choice, but because they optimized for capacity instead of resilience. This is the part people miss. A larger house doesn't just cost more money, it costs future flexibility. And flexibility is what allows income to grow without stress. The smaller house doesn't make person B poorer. It gives them breathing room. It lets them think longer term, act more patiently, and make decisions based on probability instead of pressure. This is why buying the maximum you can afford is rarely the smart move. The right house isn't the one that looks impressive. It's the one that leaves your future intact. Because wealth doesn't come from stretching. It comes from having room to move when conditions change. And the house that protects that room is almost always smaller than what the bank tells you to buy. Let's step away from lifestyle and psychology for a moment and look at the math the way the system actually does. Imagine a mortgage with these terms, a $400,000 loan, 30 years, an interest rate of 6.5%. The monthly payment comes out to roughly $2,530. That's the number everyone focuses on. It looks clean, predictable, easy to fit into a spreadsheet. But here's what that payment really represents over time. Over 30 years, the total amount paid is about $910,000. Roughly 510,000 of that is interest. In other words, you don't just buy the house once, you buy it twice. And yet even that isn't the most important cost. The largest cost of a mortgage isn't the interest line item, it's the opportunity cost. Every dollar locked into a fixed payment is a dollar that can't be invested when markets are down. It can't support a career transition. It can't absorb a layoff, a health issue, or an unexpected shift in income. Mortgage math assumes stability. It assumes your income stays steady, your health stays intact, the labor market stays friendly. But life doesn't move in straight lines. And then there's time. 30 years isn't just a duration, it's a constraint. It quietly shapes what risks feel responsible, what opportunities feel reckless, and how much uncertainty you're willing to tolerate. The bank sees a stream of payments. You live inside the rigidity those payments create. That's why two people with the same income can end up with completely different financial lives. One has margin, the other has obligations, and over time it's the margin, not the house, that compounds. So the question isn't whether you should ever buy a home, it's how to do it without quietly boxing yourself in. There are 3 principles that matter more than any checklist. The first is a simple stress test. Assume your income drops by 20%, not because you failed, but because something changed. If your life still works, if you can pay your bills, sleep at night, and think clearly, that's a sign the structure is sound. If that scenario immediately creates panic, you're not buying a house. You're buying pressure. The second principle is reversibility. A house shouldn't be a one-way door. You want the option to sell it, rent it out, or walk away from the location without destroying your finances. The more easily a decision can be reversed, the less dangerous it is. And the third principle is restraint. Never use the full amount a bank is willing to lend you. If a bank approves you for $500,000, a safer range is closer to 60 or 70% of that. Banks optimize for repayment certainty. You need to optimize for survivability. Because the goal of buying a home isn't to prove you've made it. It's to create a structure that supports your life, not one that forces you to defend it. A good home doesn't take away your options, it protects them. And the houses that do that are almost always smaller, cheaper, and quieter than what the system encourages you to buy. So after all the math, all the comparisons, and all the structure we've unpacked, this decision comes down to one thing: not how much the bank will lend you. That's the easiest question in the process and the least useful. A better question sounds quieter. If my income dropped next year, would my life still work? Not comfortably, not optimally, just work. Would I still have room to think clearly, room to make decisions instead of reacting, room to handle change without panic? And then there's an even deeper question. Does this decision open my future or does it narrow it? Banks will never ask you that. They can't. Their models don't measure time horizons. They don't price flexibility. They don't account for how pressure changes behavior. They only measure whether a payment will keep coming. That's why approval feels reassuring, but often leads to fragility later. Because approval is about performance, alignment is about survival. Buying a home doesn't make you safe. Margin does. Flexibility does. The ability to absorb mistakes, pauses, and changes, that's what creates real security. And the right house isn't the biggest one you can afford. It's not the one that proves you've made it. It's the one that protects your margin first, your flexibility second, and your future third. Everything else is optional. Because in the long run, the goal isn't to own a house. It's to own a life that still works when conditions don't.